Welcome in, Falcons fans. Your boy Bryce Lewis back at it again for more Atlanta Falcons content. And the NFL draft has came and now it is gone. And reviews are out on the Falcons draft class. A lot of moves being made, but a lot of people, for the most part, at least locally, are pretty happy with what the Falcons have done. And I wanted to bring on a good friend of mine, Brotalk. You may have seen him on social. I feel like he goes viral every week. To come on, talk about the draft with me, give his thoughts on everything. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm good, man. It feels good for once that it feels like 99% of the fan base is on board with what happened, with what Terry did. And that's like a phenomenon because it's usually you're either on this side or you're on that side. So to see the fan base come together and get excited, it's a special time for the Atlanta Falcons, for the fan base. And thank you for inviting me. You know I love to talk ball anytime I'm here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And I appreciate you coming on, my guy. So, I mean, you're right. I mean, it's one of those things where I think this draft had a clear strategy to it. I think they knew what they needed to go do. They said defense was going to be the focus. Defense was the focus. First round, making a splash immediately. 2 pass rushers in the first round. Jalen Walker from Georgia, James Pierce Jr. from Tennessee, trading back up into the first round to get him. I saw something that said they originally were going to draft James at 15, but didn't know Jalen Walker would fall to them, and then they had to take Jalen, and then they had to come back and get James, which I think was the first, time that I guess we've seen the Falcons be aggressive, addressing the pass rush. But also, this is the first time I believe in franchise history they've drafted a Georgia player in the first round as well. So
yeah, first time ever.
Yeah, so clearly, it's funny. People were saying, like, why are they taking so long during Georgia's golden age? But, it is what it is. So they were able to get that. They came back, added to the secondary as well, got somebody late in the round that could be a project tackle that we'll get to, and then also killed the undrafted free agent class. So let's start with the pass rushers first. What was your initial thoughts when they selected Jalen Walker and James Pierce Jr. at the end of the night?
Well, as the draft progressed, you see all the predictions and the mock drafts from all the big wigs, Dane Brugler, you have Daniel Jeremiah and all them, Mel Kiper. And, Jalen Walker wasn't supposed to be there. And I think the front office said that this is our top guy, but let's be real, he's not going to be there because he is a top talent in this draft class. Mm-hmm. And, when you saw Carolina pass on him, it's like, okay, well then New Orleans has a chance to. Well, then they pass on him again, and it kept happening. And the closer and closer we got, there were only 2 teams that I thought might take him. It was the team right before us in Indianapolis, who they need help at linebacker. Some people view him as off ball. We view him as an edge. And then San Francisco. When San Francisco took his running mate, I'm like, okay, it's going to happen. Now, a lot of you have seen on social media, I wasn't a big Jalen Walker guy. Mm. So when it happened, I knew it was going to happen, so I wasn't surprised. Jalen Walker brings drive that the Falcons don't have. He's undersized as edge. That was my biggest thing. How's he going to handle the NFL, with these guys that can anchor him in? And I think he can be coached up because Jeff Ulbrich said he's going to play edge. And I think he can do really good things there, especially with all the stunts that I think Jeff Ulbrich is going to be, sending out. And I, just like you, I'm sure, I thought our night was over. Earlier, I was on, one time with the fan. I did hint, this kind of feels like the year to trade back up. And I was thinking it might be Mike Green, who eventually fell to the Baltimore Ravens in the second round. So when we did trade up, I was stunned. I was excited. There were a couple players there. I was like, it's got to be either Mike Green or Malachi Starks, because Malachi Starks was very highly talked about. And we just jumped in front of the Ravens. So it's like, okay, that was the Ravens pick. We want to get our guy. And then James Pierce was announced, which I was a little surprised from all the reports saying he was going to fall out of the first round because of his character concerns, right? Mm-hmm. And then we took him. Well, then you start seeing the reports that the Falcons did their homework. They felt confident. And just like what you said, they were confident enough that they were going to take him at 15 over some other edge rushers. So when they saw him falling, I love the move. Everyone's always talked about Atlanta. You almost landed Montez Sweat. You almost landed Danielle Hunter. You almost did this. And people kept getting tired of hearing, well, Terry tried. They wanted to see action. And it's funny to see him take action and then be criticized to the max about what he did in order to try and correct an area of need since the early 2010s. This pass rush has been abysmal. He tried it last year with Matt Judon. It didn't work, right? And then he goes out and does it, and he's criticized by the national media. The fan base overall loved it. I loved it. You know, James Pierce is at one point was going to be the number 1 overall pick. You know, this time last year when we were doing our early mock drafts, he was the number 1 guy, and he fell to our laps in 26. So then you take two, besides taking 2 young pass rushers, you now have 2 fifth-year options to secure them for at least 5 years here in Atlanta. Terry did his job. Now it's up to the coaching staff.
Yeah, and I think that's obviously going to be super important. I think, you know, like you said, some people said James Pierce maybe was the best pure pass rusher in this draft in general. And there's just a lot of upside there. And some people think he can immediately come in and contribute in his rookie season, where Jalen Walker, that could be a bit of a project, but also someone who can impact the game in different ways. And I did like the fact that they said they're going to commit to leaving him at edge, because at Georgia, they did use him all over the place. But he was like, listen, let's let him lock in at one position, let him focus, let him grow. And then maybe if progress is made, then we'll start to see a more expanded bag. Obviously, maybe some people have said comparison to Caton Ellis, maybe using him that way at some point as a guy who can rush the passer, but also do some things, obviously, as a linebacker as well. So I think that's one room that I think after the draft and after the moves, they moved Leonard Floyd, you still have Ebiketie, you know what I'm saying? You brought Morgan Fox in. After some of the additions that have been made to the D-line, I think some people are feeling better about the edge room and the pass rush room, which I think is very important, because when was the last time you could say we felt good about that room? So I think that was obviously a very big step forward for the team. Now, came back and they were able to get Watts from Notre Dame, and that was a move that some people were also surprised by, that he fell that far to the Falcons. How did you feel when they got him? Obviously, one of the big things was trying to find a guy opposite Jesse Bates. Did they get their guy? Because some people say he could be a day 1 starter immediately, getting him that late in the 3rd round.
Yeah, I think he's going to compete for that starting role, and I think he could be there. And similar to how it felt with Jalen Walker, you saw his name just slowly falling. And, you know, talking to everyone, it's like, okay, everyone is helping the Falcons, taking offensive tackles, wide receivers, running backs, like all the defensive guys that we wanted that should have gone in the 2nd round were slowly trickling down. And then Terry made his infamous day 2 trade up, only moving 5 slots. He gave up a 5th round pick in next year. You know, a lot of people forget we can use next year's capital, as we did both times this past week, and went and got his guy. And, you know, I think the comparison is there. We already have a guy that's like Xavier Watts and Jesse Bates. So what perfect person to mentor Xavier Watts? You know, he's not the fastest guy. He's not the strongest guy, but he's an excellent football player. Obviously, he's got ball hawking ability, and that was an emphasis. You know, Jesse Bates has been really our only ball hawk. Everyone's complaining, AJ, where are the interceptions? You know, he's a PBU machine, but Jesse Bates was clearly the only one in the secondary making any type of plays. So that was, besides the pass rush, that seemed to be a focal point. And for Xavier Watts to be there, man, I'll be honest with you. When I saw Jared Wilson's name falling, I thought that was going to be the guy. And then the Patriots sniped him 1 pick before, but it seems like it wasn't him. It was Xavier Watts the whole time. So that just gets me excited as a fan, and someone that's looking for the Falcons defense to take the next step, is getting younger on the defense and getting guys that are proven at the college level at high programs to immediately make impact. So yeah, I do think Xavier Watts could be a day 1 starter.
And I think too, on top of that, again, this man was a ball hawk at Notre Dame. Not the most athletic guy, but probably one of the most cerebral guys in the draft. And it may work next to Jesse, because maybe they're like, we don't need this fly around all over the place Ed Reed type of guy when you already got one. You just need a guy who can recognize and diagnose and make a play when it's there, but also know his assignment. And I think that's something that I think they believe in with Xavier, and why they think he could be a really good addition with Jesse Bates in the back end. Because again, I kind of said early with the picks, the rush, and then the guys that they've picked up that we'll talk about, it feels like they're kind of going into this with a, you know, we're going to create pressure. We want sacks. If we can't, we can rush the quarterback, maybe make him make bad decisions or rush throws. Then we have ball hawks in the secondary who can take advantage of that and create turnovers as a defense. And Xavier Watts was a big step in that. And then also coming back in the 4th round, getting Billy Bowman Jr. from Oklahoma. I first when I saw it, I was like, I feel like this pick's gonna make some people like, another safety. Like, why is this the end of the Marco Helm? So what are we doing? And then afterwards, they say that he's going to be converted to nickel. What is your impression of the pick, and how do you think that conversion is going to go, putting him at nickel instead of safety, which maybe some people would say obviously he's been his natural position since he's played it the last few years at Oklahoma?
So I much like everyone else was surprised. I was like, Billy Bowman, we just got Xavier Watts, then we get Billy Bowman. They are not messing around, just like with the pass rush in the secondary. And it took me a second. It's like, okay, how does he fit? Like, what's their thought process? And to hear he's going to make that transition, or how the coaching staff views him as the nickel, I think is great. And he could seriously compete, for the starting, just like Xavier Watts, to be a day one starter. He is a machine when it comes to laying the wood and hitting people, and also having great technical skills that a nickel position needs to cover some of these bigger slots. You see CeeDee Lamb in the slot. You see Mike Evans in the slot now, where traditionally it used to be Mike Evans, you're only on the outside. No, offensive coordinators are now moving him in the inside to get that mismatch. So the coaching staff knew that was a weak point. Us as fans, we knew that, right? Mm-hmm. They're trying to upgrade it there. And a lot of people try and point at Billy Bowman. He had a 23% missed tackle percentage at Oklahoma. I just got to remind you guys, they were part of the Big 12. Their first year in the SEC. It's something they have to face it. And I think the coaching staff knows that and will do that, to where it'd be crazy to have, technically 3 safeties. He's not the player, but I see a lot of similarities in Brian Branch. Okay, mm-hmm. Brian Branch was a safety out of Alabama. His first year in the league, he played the nickel position for the Lions because that's where they needed him. And then his second year, he moved to safety. I'm not saying that's the route Billy Bowman is going to be. I'm not saying he's going to be at the level of Brian Branch. I just see a lot of similarities in how they play the game. And overall, I was excited. There was a guy that I thought we would get that we'll talk about later that we did end up getting that I thought was going to be the pick here. I know a lot of fans want a defensive tackle, and I did too. But there was a run right before us, and all the top defensive tackles that were there in round 4. Talking to you, Howie Roseman, you took one of our guys, one of my boy Berto's guys, just a few picks before us. But I couldn't be happier with how the first 4 rounds had gone for the Falcons at that point.
Yeah, and like I said, you're again a guy who had, I think he had 1 less career interception than Watt. So you clearly see guys who can attack the ball skills, make plays, be in the right position, they're very optimistic type of defense. So I think that's just, again, you're seeing an identity of what they're trying to do, especially in the Jeff, bringing a different, especially because I feel like Jimmy Lake didn't really have every guy's going to say they have a vision, but it wasn't like Jeff, where I feel like he's been around, he's been a part of defenses, he knows what he likes in a defense.
Well, and to add to that is, a lot of people are going to comment, we should have never hired Jimmy Lake, which hindsight's 2020, sure. But, Raheem had a belief in the 2 coordinators he brought in. One worked out, one didn't. He made the tough decision to fire his friend. And then, like you said, he brought in Jeff, who's seen a lot of football during his time in Atlanta. He got to learn under Robert Saleh. He took over that defense and got to, bounce ideas there. Well, now he gets a reunion with Raheem's knowledge that he learned in LA, and now they get to mesh it together and have that experience knowing when to call a certain defense in certain situations. And I think that's where Jimmy Lake fell short, and that's where we'll improve drastically with Jeff Ulbrich.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to see his vision and how he's going to use everybody and how that will work out. Because listen, game day is going to come, and I've said this is what I said. I said realistically, I think they're going to start week 1. I think they're going to start Floyd, and I think they're going to start Ebiketie. That's who I think they're going to start. And then you'll have Pierce and Walker kind of rotate in, and then we'll see where Zach Harrison is. We'll see where he is in that process. But I think that's what they're going to do, just to start with the veterans, the guys that, been there, more familiar, and then not really put too much pressure on the rookies, maybe use them as special packages, pass rush packages, and see where that goes from there. So, again, the Falcons did make their last pick in the 7th round. Jack Nelson from Wisconsin. A lot of people said, hey, Wisconsin offensive lineman, so, there's good pedigree there. There's good pedigree there. A lot of corn has been eaten, all right? Right, man, probably went fishing. That's exactly what I want to hear from my lineman.
Right. And he was at the bar. He was at the bar when he got selected.
Exactly. That's the type of lineman I want on my team. But they feel like, again, project guy. They feel like I've seen people say there's something there that can be worked, developed, could maybe be a guy you give a shot to in a couple of years, a year from now, depending on Caleb McGarry's situation, or Jake Matthews, depending on what'd you think about that pick?
So seeing it, I didn't watch a whole lot of tape of Jack Nelson initially. So I was like, okay, great. This is our project offensive lineman. Let me dive into it. Well, come and find out, he played guard, he played tackle, but after the interview, he talked about his most comfortable spot is at the right tackle position. And funny enough, we have a right tackle that's contract is up after this year. And to your point, Wisconsin Badgers have been known to pump up future Hall of Famers, all pros. I'm not saying that's what Jack Nelson's going to do, but he just fits the mold of what Dwayne fourth round. And you get a guy that has no pressure to start, but can be coached up and worked on and potentially take that starting position if Caleb McGarry is not re-signed. For Jake Matthews' sake, he did get that extension. I think they're not worried about Jake because now he's going to be the non-blindside tackle for Michael Penix. So that alleviates a little bit of pressure where, Penix can have a little bit, in the corner of his eye, what's going on with Jake. It's more so the right side we have to focus on. And if Jack Nelson is that, I'm excited to see how he develops and potentially becomes the starter.
Yeah, and it's funny because multiple times you already mentioned guys who expected to go higher and they didn't. This draft was a little weird in that regard. Yeah. A lot of talent slipping. And I know they've talked about day 3, especially, has changed with NIL in college. A lot of talent that may have came out didn't come out because of the fact that they can make more money, maybe instead of being a 5th-round pick. And so then maybe, teams also, when you evaluate players, you're just like, I really like this guy, or, and then you got guys who slip through the cracks. And now switching to the Falcons undrafted free agency, I get it. It's undrafted free agency. I know everybody wants to let's calm down. But they got some guys who people feel like have a legitimate path to make the roster. And let's start with Kansas cornerback Kobe Bryant, a guy who some people projected as a top day 3 pick. A lot of good ball skills. Also another ball hawk as well. Big thing for him, he's just not the biggest player. He needs to put on some weight and everything like that. But in terms of ball skills, coverage, some people were saying they think he could potentially compete for the starting job. I don't know if the Falcons are going to rush that unless he just completely outplays Mike Hughes. I think they're comfortable with Mike Hughes unless, something changes. But a guy who I definitely feel like can make the roster and be a guy that they slowly bring along the development. What did you think of them being able to pick him up in undrafted free agency?
That was crazy because, like you said, this guy was supposed to go in the 4th round. And then he just kept falling. And his running mate opposite side of him also went undrafted. So then you kind of scratch your head. It's like, what happened? Was there like an interview issue? Was there a health issue? I haven't seen anything to say that there was a problem with him. He's, posted on Instagram how upset he is that 26 other corners were taken ahead of him. Now, granted, he thinks he's the best one. You want that in your corner, right? He's that trash talking guy, which a lot of people fell in love with at the Shrine Bowl. But to see the technical skills, the ball hawk ability, and his no fear to go make a tackle, that's the type of stuff that coaches used to be, throw a 4th round pick at him. Let's go. Throw a 5th round pick at him. And so this could be one of those hidden gems because, let's be real. The roster is not really built in the 1st and 2nd round. It's built in day 3 and who you get in undrafted free agency. This team needs to get a little younger. A lot of veterans got signed on 1-year deals. And I do expect Kobe to make the roster because he's going to be running his mouth. He's going to be getting in people's heads. And his athletic ability and technical skills will back it up. And you just want someone on that defense. Even if he's not the starter, he's going to be a great hype man. He's going to do everything he can to be the starter. So you pointed out Mike Hughes. Now, I think Kobe would more so compete for the nickel. But if he beats out Mike Hughes, if I'm Mike Hughes, I'm looking over my shoulder and not, okay, this kid's got some fire. Those are the type of players that have that drive, have something to prove to hit the field. And those are the guys that usually, do they love football? Yeah, Kobe Bryant loves football.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, he's already I saw what you said about him. I guess I don't know if he's picking number 2 or what.
Yeah, that was a fan edit. I kind of got the fan base riled up. You know, he wore 2 at Kansas. A fan kept it on there, but it's like, okay, Kobe, let's be real. You're not going to be number 2.
They say you're undrafted. We can't give you priority or numbers, man. We got something that left for you. Can't wait for my corner to be wearing 98.
Hey, you know, I thought about 44, like Marlon Humphrey. A lot of people don't like it, but Marlon Humphrey is a good corner.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Get out of here, man.
That'd be crazy. But nah, I mean, I'm high on him too. A guy who, again, even if he, like you say, if he doesn't play a lot this year, definitely I could see being in the picture. A guy who, again, with corner having a lot of competition this year, you know, and obviously the Falcons have good receivers, so he's going to be able to, you know, practice and play against one-on-ones against Cal, against Drake, against Darnell. If he can hold up against those guys, that could be a very positive sign for him moving forward. As you already know, he has a fire lit under him because of what you said about 26 other corners being drafted above him. So really excited to see what he can do when he gets into camp and see those updates with what he does. Let's get to another guy on the D line from Miami, Simeon Barlow. A guy who, again, sneaky guy, showed some pass rush ability in Miami last year. Also feel like they also think he's a solid run stuffing guy. And listen, the defensive line needs depth, especially in the middle, especially that defensive tackle spot. Some people also believe he has a path, maybe, to make the roster. What did you think about that pickup?
So I thought it was great because I view him more as a run stuffer that can provide a little bit of juice in the pass rush game. And a lot of people talked about it. We need more beef in the middle, you know, and I think that's where Zach Harrison's role kind of comes in. I could see Simeon beating out some of these veterans we brought back, you know, like TQ, Kentavious Street. You know, he has a similar build, can anchor, I think, a little bit better against guards and centers. So that's going to be crucial, is how he handles going up against, you know, someone like Chris Lindstrom and, you know, Matthew Bergeron, Caleb McGarry. When they hit those double teams, they can move just about anyone. So if he impresses, I could see him being a depth piece, a rotation piece, if not a practice squad guy. But I'm scared to let him hit the practice squad because I don't think he'll last there very long. I think he can contribute to an extent, you know, obviously not a superstar level, but a good rotational piece to start off his career. And then we'll see where it goes from there.
Yeah, and obviously, like I said, especially with defensive tackle still being a question for a lot of people. Like I said, you never know. Could be a guy who can get into rotation and maybe, you know, get some snaps, 10, 15, 20 snaps, depending on however they rotate, and kind of go from there. Let's go into Joshua Gray from Oregon State, a guy who was also projected to be a day 3 pick, a guy who had played guard and tackle at Oregon State, so he has experience playing different positions. But I know people are still unsure about Ryan, you know, Uzel playing the starting center. People want competition. I don't know if the Falcons are going to put him at that spot or they're going to put him at guard or wherever. What did you think about that pick? And just, you know, I feel like he's a guy who, again, project, let him grow, let him improve. You just get him in there, you know what I'm saying? Don't have to put these major expectations on him. But what did you think about the pickup?
So I thought it was great because the versatility won, right? He played tackle, he played guard, but I more so view him as a center that can play guard. And I think he's going to be the main competition for Ryan Nazeal. Initially, I thought it was just going to be Nazeal and Javon Gwynn competing for the starting center position. But Gray has a lot more size. I think he can move a little bit better than Gwynn and Nazeal. You know, I honestly don't care if he's an undrafted free agent, 6'4", 310. If you can move some bodies, you're going to earn yourself a spot. And, you know, there were plenty of talent like Joshua Gray that were tackles, but they're like, you know, I'll give you a good example. Greg Zabel, right? Obviously, Greg Zabel's a better prospect. Play tackle. He's going to play guard, but also was looked at to play center. And I think that's what Joshua Gray is going to be, except in the inverse. He's going to be a center that plays guard. And then just watching a little bit of his tape, he's got that nastiness in finishing his blocks that you want in offensive linemen. Sometimes offensive linemen, they can be strong, they can move people, they don't really finish their blocks. And that was something, you know, going through my time playing football, it's like, you got to finish it. You got to let them know that you're going to be here all game and you're going to wear them out. And from what I saw Joshua Gray do, and just a little bit of tape I watched on him, he has that.
Yeah, and I think too, you know, again, healthy competition. It'll, again, guy you can get in your system. And just like I said, let him grow, let him improve there. And then, like I said, you never know, injuries happen. So if he can show that he can, you know, hold up, you know, I think definitely a guy we'll be looking at preseason for sure with the second, third team offensive line units and just seeing how he does against other teams, second and third teams, and just kind of seeing the progress as he continues to move forward. Now let's get to my favorite, one of my favorite undrafted free agent pickups, Nick Nash, my GOAT from San Jose State. I'm not even a San Jose fan, but I know about Nick Nash, a Brotalk Award finalist this past season, 6'3", 195. Biggest thing for him, not a speed guy. He's a possession route runner guy, but he had 100 catches, 1,300 yards, 16 touchdowns. A guy who some people think, again, real path to make the team if he can show out a little bit in camp. And a guy who I'm like you, don't know if I want him hitting the practice squad. Don't know if, I feel like people were surprised that Nick Nash was not taken. What is your take on Nick Nash? Because this guy, even against, if you want to look at some tape, guys, look at the USC tape when they played USC. That was a really good game for him. He had 3 touchdowns in that game. So,
yeah, you want to talk about play competition? You had 3 touchdowns on USC. What are they? A Pac-10 team now? Yeah. I mean that's a serious competition.
This was a top 10 USC team at the time.
There you go. But to see the Triple Crown winner go undrafted, and I think you mentioned this, is like a lot of people are going to be like, well, then he's not that good. Well, he's pretty good. And I've seen the comparisons, and I'm going to say it. I see it too. Puka Nacua. Nacua's not the greatest runner, right? Doesn't have breakaway speed, but he finds ways to get open, and that's the key for Nick Nash. And from what I saw, he's only been playing wide receiver. He's a quarterback converted to wide receiver. He's only been playing wide receiver for 2 years, and to win the Triple Crown, that says a lot about him. And he understands the mind of a quarterback. So how is that going to translate with working with Michael Penix Jr.? He's going to know what this corner or this DB or linebacker or whoever's covering him is going to do, the tendencies and where the window is going to be and know when to look. And so if you can win yourself a roster spot, which I think he will, you could potentially see him beat out someone like Ray Ray. I like Ray Ray. I like what he did. But if he's got better hands, if he's got better, separation ability because he's able to manipulate the defense, that's what you want. You want a safety blanket. I think Nick Nash can be that safety blanket for Michael Penix Jr. as the third receiver, right? Darnell Mooney's your speedy guy that can win you down the sideline. Drake's a big slot. It's got great hands, win those 50-50 balls, which Nick Nash can do as well. But then you have someone that is going to be in that zone window when you're going to throw it. I mean, and he's willing to do the dirty work and blocking. Mm-hmm. Come on now, that's someone that's going to make the roster.
Yeah, definitely. I really hope he does really well in camp. Hopefully he stays healthy, everything of that nature. Just really, really good stuff right there. And we'll talk about one more guy, Joshua Simon from South Carolina. Tight end 3 obviously is not something you think about a lot, but a guy who could be a real candidate for that spot. A guy who was projected as a 6th-round pick initially by NFL.com. What are we thinking? Is there upside here to this? Obviously, we know it's Pitts, Warner. Is there upside for him to get that 3rd spot, or do you see him more as a practice squad guy?
No, there is definitely a potential to get onto the roster as the 3rd tight end and potentially work up the depth chart because we ran some 13 personnel when we had Ross Dwelly as the H-back kind of lining up in the backfield with Bijan and Michael Penix Jr. leading the way. And that's how you make NFL rosters, right? Joshua Simon, 6'4", 260. The dude's pure muscle. And he's got some good hands, and he can have good routes, little check downs here and there. But I'd more so be intrigued how he helps the running game at first. And then if he can develop into a pass catcher for Michael Penix Jr. as tight end 3, great. But it's someone that I could see making the roster because we don't have, from what I can see, we only have Charlie Werner and Kyle Pitts. So yeah, as long as he doesn't mess it up, he could be like that tight end / H-back player that comes in during 13 personnel in the red zone or just when we're trying to grind out clock. So I'm excited. I didn't know a whole lot about him. I started looking him up and I liked what I saw. As an undrafted free agent, that was a great pickup in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's why I think a lot of people feel like the Falcons really killed their undrafted free agency class. Again, I know they're undrafted free agents. Trust me, I get it. But the positions of where they picked up some of these guys are positions where that's not there's no way. There's some positions yeah, he's a camp body. He's not making the team. And there's some of these guys that we talked about are guys who there's a path they could get on this roster and
that's rare to see so much. I think the majority of including who we drafted and then the undrafted free agency class. Like, these are guys that could play some serious snaps, potential starters in the near future. And that's how you build your team, right? You could find that one gem, like a Grady Jarrett in the 5th round, who was an undrafted free agent for someone else. Shoot, I'm blanking. I had someone, but like a Jordan Mailata for the Eagles in the 7th round, that could be Jack Nelson. This was overall Terry Fontenot's best draft, and they did their homework. It's like, I don't know what they did differently, how they scouted differently. It paid off. And then as long as he's able to come out with a winning season, right? It's not up to him to coach up the players, but as long as the coaching staff can put out a winning season, we'll see more of Terry Fontenot. And if this is his trajectory, it's only going to get better from here.
Exactly. And I think that's the biggest thing, is how this will translate on the field. Is it going to translate to winning? Will the Falcons be able to take that next step they hope to take? I want to kind of circle back a little bit and ask you about a guy who this will essentially be his rookie year, in Braylon Trice. A guy who I think, again, coming back from major injury, don't know where he'll be with things. But what do you want to see from him this year? Because clearly he will not be like top of the line pass rusher. We need you out there a lot. But a guy who, again, since we haven't seen, there is upside. I know a lot of people liked him when we drafted him last year. What are you looking at for Braylon Trice and just him coming back this year?
I've been saying this for a lot of fans that like to bring up his name. It's like, well, we have Braylon Trice. Like, you got to temper your expectations. He had a major knee injury last year. Luckily, it was the first preseason game, so it was early in the year. He's going to have extra time to recover and make sure his quad, his hamstring, everything around it is strengthened back up to where he can plant again. But I wouldn't expect him to have more than 5 sacks. And I think that's his ceiling because of his limited snap count, because the coaches are going to want him to get his legs out. Maybe his snap count upticks as the season goes and they feel comfortable with how his body's holding up, his legs and all that. But temper expectations. I think the following year, the 2026 season, is really where you can have, okay, these are the clear expectations for him as long as he's able to stay healthy this year.
Yeah, definitely. And that's how I feel. I feel they do this. It doesn't put a lot of pressure on him and allows him just kind of come back at his own pace. And so that way you're not having to put so much on a guy coming back, like you said, from a major knee injury as well. And I do want to also let people know, as we get closer to camp, this conversation is going to come back up again when we don't play starters this preseason.
All right.
So I just want everybody to be prepared for that. So we should see the rookies, but we'll see if there's anybody they're like, all right, let's not put them out there too much.
I think maybe we'll see Michael Penix for a series or two in the first preseason game, and that's it. Don't, like you said, temper your expectations. We're not going to see preseason. I think the rookies will get a heavy dose because they want them. You got to get a taste of what NFL speed is, even though it's against 2s and 3s, but I think we'll see them a good amount in the first 2 games, and then after that, we'll wait until week 1.
Yeah, definitely. Last question for you, sir, and I'll let you go. With the current state of the roster right now, if the Falcons were to make any other moves before training camp or during training camp, where would you be looking? Is it defensive tackle? Is it somewhere else? And is there any names as well that you may want to throw out there?
So defensive tackle, I think, still an area of concern because even though I think we have some solid guys in the defensive tackle room, you don't have the size that you want. You don't have that 6'2", 315-pound guy that's just going to eat up 2 or 3 guys to allow other guys to have one-on-ones or keep those linebackers clean. There was one guy that was on the market. He signed recently, I think today, Jonathan Hankins. He was on the Seahawks last year. He re-signed with the Seahawks. Veteran guy that could have just, he understands how to take on double teams. So not a lot of names out there. I look to see what the free agent class looks like in 26 to see if a potential, trade deadline name that we could see a trade happen. Not great either. So I think we're going to have to just try and hope that our defensive line, hope. But when you have guys, when you have a collective unit that's all working together, it can work out. So you could see, the 26th draft, we could be targeting a top defensive tackle with our first pick. That is a 2nd-round pick. We'll be picking towards the end of the 2nd round.
Yeah. All right. Listen, some people were up in arms about that trade. They said, our future. And And I'm just like, listen, guys, this day they took an aggressive approach. They said, listen, we're not thinking about next year. I've said this, and I will commend the front office, Terry and Raheem, for this. They view this team as win now team. They view this team as playoff team. They are thinking as such, even though we haven't won in years. They are thinking as this is what we are.
Because if you look at it, right, a lot of people talked about it with when free agency hit and whatnot, is the Falcons made moves, but it wasn't necessarily moves that made us better. It just kept us at the same level. It didn't make us worse, but it didn't make us better. Well, now you hit the draft class. I can say with confidence that we have improved, right? And we won 8 games. You know, we went on that little skid. We know why, right? It's a sensitive subject in Atlanta. But now we have our QB1 of the future. We have 4 of the 5 offensive linemen, you know, and honestly, the 5th guy was in 8 of those games last year when we were winning. And a lot of the same faces on offense, you add some new fresh faces on defense that can improve your roster. There's no reason why you can't think that this Falcons team can't win the division and be in the playoffs next season.
Listen, I remember when we drafted those pass rushers, Panthers accounts were like, I hate the Falcons. They're trying to kill Bryce Young.
Right, exactly. That's exactly what we're trying to do.
Exactly. Him.
Baker.
Baker. Listen, Baker, Slinger.
Baker, as much as I dislike him, he has a knack for being able to escape the pocket.
Yep.
I don't understand it because he's not the fastest guy. He just knows how to do it.
Slippery guy. He's a slippery guy. And then obviously, the Saints fans are crashing out over. Yeah, that was a scene. That was a scene. But him and Spencer Rattler battling for QB1 this year. So we'll have to see how that goes for sure, man. But I appreciate you, man, coming on to the show, man, giving your expert analysis on the draft class and undrafted free agency and, you know, where this team is looking right now. Let people know where they can find you if they want to keep up with you.
I appreciate you having me on, man. As you can see, the handle at BK2 I will be changing that soon on Twitter. It'll probably be at Dirty Bird Central. That's where I'm known on YouTube and TikTok as well. I'll be giving a more in-depth analysis, kind of showing some film on each of our prospects on YouTube. It's in the works. I should be cranking that out sometime this week. So again, Bryce, thanks so much for having me on.
Yes, sir. And I appreciate you taking time out, man, to come on. And obviously, guys, if you enjoyed this episode, hit the subscribe button, like the video, leave a comment down below about what we discussed today. Obviously, go subscribe to him over on his channel. Follow him on X, wherever he is, TikTok as well. And we'll have to continue to see if the Falcons do make any more moves. They are currently OTAs right now, voluntary OTAs, minicamp right now. So guys coming in, just getting some work in with the guys, and we'll see as we progress forward. Planning to be back at training camp again this year for a couple of days as well again. So be able to give you guys up close and personal what I think about some of these guys in the coming months. So like I said, that's Brotalk. I'm Bryce. See you next time.